Okay, Damixisagu, hello and good day to you. Nisto Anagok, Roland. My name is Roland. Nidoktu Sikokotok. I'm from Sikokotok, which is also nowadays known as Lethbridge, Alberta. And I'm greeting you in the Blackfoot language just to recognize the fact that I'm here in the heartland of the Blackfoot people of the traditional lands. And I'm grateful to the Alberta Beef Living Lab to talk about our work, my team's work on the Holos model, Canadian software that we built and make available for free to understand where emissions come from on the farm and what management practice changes might iterate and change your greenhouse gas budget, hopefully to the downward scale. Quick introduction. The Holos model, we use this to do what we call the whole farm analysis. So the idea is basically that if you change things on the farm, you might have trade-offs on the other end of the farm. And so by encompassing in the model the whole farm system, we have a chance to see these trade-offs and basically follow through what effects or what trickle effects changes in management practices have. When we do build the model, we follow two guiding principles. One is transparency and the other one is reliability. We have the model open source. We only use peer-reviewed science or expert opinion to put things into the model, so we don't make them up. Currently, it's basically the big driver is essentially the supply chains asking for the carbon footprints. And this is where I had one farmer call me who basically said, like, I'm asked to use the Cool Farm tool, but I want to use the Holos model because I know it's Canadian. It does better reflect what I do on my farm. How can I make sure that they accept this? And I was like, well, I can't really, like, I have no power to tell the industry to use the Holos model. All I can do is basically say, we do our best to represent how to calculate greenhouse gas emissions in Canada best, as far as we know, and as far as we work with our scientists. It's open source, so if the Cool Farm tool people want to do a Canadian adaptation, they're welcome too. Like it's all open and out in the open, but it's probably the farmers and producers who have to push back to the industry to say, we know there's a better way to calculate it. The major difference is, to start with, the Holos model is the only model that I'm aware of that's open source by default. Like there's other models, you can access them open source, but you have to pay to start with. And the other other major difference is that a lot of the global solutions that come in, they started off with global emission factors to then refine them further to national level. We basically come from the Canadian perspective. We built this straight away with the newest and most up-to-date emission estimates that we know of that exist in Canada. So my argument would be, if you want to know what is the latest on calculating greenhouse gas emissions in Canada based on emission factors, come to the Holos model because it's in there. For instance, the global N2O emission factor that the International Panel of Climate Change came up with in the 90s was based on Bauman et al. And so the factor back then was 1.3% of the N applied becomes nitrous oxide. But what they did when they established this emission factor was to use a lot of measurements from actual tropical countries. And so we know that warmer climate, more moisture drives N2O emissions. So there was a reason to say, no, we don't want this global emission factor for Canada because it would way overestimate nitrous oxide emissions. And so what we have found, especially in the prairies, the fraction of N that's lost as N2O is much lower than the global average. This is based on measurements that have taken place in Canada. This takes scientific expertise from these measurement people to come together to agree that, yes, this is the emission factor and the methodology that we want to go forward with in a national accounting methodology, and then basically subsequently in the Holos model. I do have a background in agriculture. I studied organic farming in Germany, in the small city of Witzenhausen with the University of Kassel. What I learned in my organic farming studies is that I don't have the necessary small change to afford a farm in Germany. And so I had to look for greener pastures. We're trying to take this tool and put it into people's hands. We're not the modeling authority who holds it back. No, we give you the tool and you can play around with it yourself. I find that exciting because it puts you in a tricky position, because as a scientist you thrive for accuracy and specificity, and yet here the conscious decision is no, we put usability over that. We give up on some of the accuracy because it would make the model too complex for everybody to use it. And so to basically dabble in this space, kind of like, can we make it better? But is it then still simple to use? Like that's a day-to-day decision. It's exciting. Producers have already experienced the effect of climate change because the growing season has become much longer in Canada. And so far, that was an advantage. But I think we're starting to now see how the variability in weather increases. And that's going to be a bummer for crop production as well as livestock production. We're not promoting or basically marketing the Holos model to force anybody. This is purely an education and decision support tool. We're trying to help you to find practices that are more sustainable with respect to greenhouse gases, but we also understand that the decision making is influenced by a lot of other factors in the farm level. And so it's an additional information that we hope is useful to the producer. And we're trying at the same time to use the Holos model as a platform to better understand what producers are doing to limit climate change and help to get that reported in the National Greenhouse Gas Inventory report. So it's a two-way street in this way, in this sense. Greenhouse gas emission estimates do play a role for supply chains. They also play a role for trade and market access. And so whether or not you believe that greenhouse gas emissions matter with respect to the planet, it matters basically to your bottom line, because you need to be able to show that Canadian producers are less impactful than producers from elsewhere in order to secure market access. We do provide the Holos model to policymakers, mostly on the federal side for now. And what we have achieved is that they understand that emission factors do change regionally, because they were using static emission factors. And so we basically promoted the Holos model used to them to understand that emissions do change from place to place and also with the management. And so by providing them with these default farm systems as we have them present in the Holos model, that gives them the opportunity to play around with some of the practices that they've built into policy programs. This is out of my control, like I have no influence on that. But by giving them the tool, they're definitely better supplied with information, and they get the opportunity to play around on their own with the model. There is the potential, if they decide to use the Holos model, to better design policies and to update them with practices that are used in the agricultural community. The living lab is certainly one way where we get a reality check on the Holos model on how usable it actually is. And it also helps us to identify the gaps that we have in our scientific understanding of what practices are being used and what effects they have. And so that certainly from a scientific side helps us to create better understanding. There is a benefit for us to actually work with farmers together in scientific experimentation. And I sadly get to do too little of that because I can't really work with farmers on model development. Um, I do appreciate every opportunity that I get out to talk with farmers and visit their farms to see and understand what they're doing, because that's something where model developers usually sit at their desk and think about how a farm works and what the processes are, but being at the farm and seeing it is a different thing, and it helps the perspective. So this more direct interaction pathway that we now have is something I think will all benefit from going forward. This is a way to that helps us to get the word out about it, and that the Holos model is there to help Canadian producers. The question of ecosystem services that the beef production provides. And so, but it's something we haven't managed to yet get into the model. So, but it's something certainly we're looking at over time to basically say, well, yes, we started off from the greenhouse gas angle, but the goal is basically to include more environmental impacts, but also benefits. This is our team currently. From the left, Pamela Mantle is our data technician. She does a lot of looking through scientific literature to find new factors that we can include. And she's also been very instrumental in the quality control of the model. Then to the right of her is Aaron McPherson. He is our only software developer. We do have a number of co-op students, computer science co-op students that usually help him, but he is the brain, so to say, of the software release. Dr. Sarah Polk is our model developer. She knows mostly the algorithm document better than I do. I dabble and help out and usually focus on nitrous oxide and the cropping side, the carbon model. And Sarah has been delving into the animal side and the livestock components. And then Dr. Rashid is our term member. He has been with us for over a year and will be for another. His task is to focus on the carbon modeling in perennial systems. So essentially read like figuring out how grazing impacts the carbon, soil carbon accumulation, and how we best actually model that. And then last but not least, you have me with my Catman E. I am the science lead, and I do mostly networking, outreach, making sure we have the money we need. And as I said, like I dabble basically in the development of the model. So currently I'm working on a fuel consumption model and a water budget model, for instance. It's a Canadian developed solution for Canadian producers.